Anyways, and so what we often, like if you go to take a college course, or you're trying to get your degree, one of the first classes they want you to take is a leadership class. Everybody wants you to be a leader of this, or a company, or a church, or an organization, or even a leader of your family. But if we think about it, it is good to have great leaders, is it not? Yes? But like we saw in VBS this week, and what we're going to kind of talk about today is there is a interplay between leaders and followers. And it's just as important that the followers, or the people of the group, know what's going on and know really what the organization means to them, or the group that they're in, or in this case, what we're going to talk about. Or let's say if we were talking about the church, does each person need to be saved? Yeah. Well, not just the pastor. So that's what we're going to talk about, is the interplay between what makes a great leader, maybe, but also what does it mean to be a great follower. So one of the first things we look for in a leader is vision, right? And the Bible talks about that. It says in Proverbs 29:18. We've probably heard this before. Most organizations today push a vision statement pretty hard because what does it do? It helps us to stay focused on what's going on. But who needs to know that vision statement? Is it just the leader that needs to know it, or does everybody need to know it and agree on it? It's very important. So let's read this. Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained, but happy is he who keeps the law." Now some of you have heard that as the people perish also, but the first line is plural with the people are unrestrained, but look at the second line. Happy is he who keeps the law, or you could put she in there if you're a woman, and that would be fine. But the reality is that it is an individual responsibility to keep the law, or to have faith, or to follow Christ, is it not? I'm not okay just because of a great leader. So let's look at a memorable leader from our own history. In 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected the 32nd President of the United States, and you've probably heard of him. You may have lived during his lifetime, or you may have read about him in a history book. And he was elected as an inspirational and idealistic leader at the time. He was thrust into leadership during what? The Great Depression, a time of economic and despair about the future. People didn't think there was much hope. People were working hard, not getting very far. And here comes this dynamic and persuasive speaker and leader to inspire people. Now, whatever you think about the benefits of his policies or accomplishments, FDR was an undeniable voice of hope and inspiration in his time, was he not? And like many leaders, he became the face of our nation, representing hope for the future. And he was reelected 3 times. And he saw America through the Great Depression, social change, and the Second World War. But in April of 1945, about 80 days after beginning his 4th term, FDR died. And the voice of this influential leader ceased. He was just gone. Goes from being the guy that you turn on the fireside chat and listen to get hope and to find out what's going on overseas and all this stuff to, he's gone. Oh, he's not immortal. He's not here forever. And so what happened? What happened at that point? All of a sudden, we have this new guy that maybe nobody's ever heard of. So here's Truman. And suddenly the world was introduced to a new leader in Harry Truman. A Midwesterner, farmer, businessman, World War I veteran, this President Truman, a very different personality, was now the leader of the free world. And if you weren't from Missouri, you'd probably never heard of him. But here he is. And he was different personality. Although this man, he had no previous knowledge of what an atom bomb even was. But we know that they were working on that at the time, right? And now he's holding the keys to the lives of so many people. Like huge decisions suddenly on this guy who was just introduced to the country recently. He's now in charge of the biggest war machine in the free world. But the people who had fought the battles on the ground were still the same, weren't they? Just changing from FDR to Truman, it didn't change them. I mean, the guys on the battlefield, they think about this and they know that it happened and they're sad about it. But why do they keep fighting? And why did the people in the factories keep building and keep doing? And it's because they were individually committed to the task that they were doing, were they not? We had this machine in the entire world that was working on one side or the other in this conflict, and one man's demise and another one's rise, it wasn't the biggest thing going on there, because there was millions of people working together. And because of the people of America and the Allies knew what they were doing and why they were doing it, the war went on unfazed. The people shared a vision of victory. So, just as in every election since then, the world doesn't descend into chaos not because we like or dislike our leader, but because people are the ones that run the world. Just like here, we all run our individual lives. You come in here and you listen to Jim or I for 30 minutes or an hour a week, but really, you're the one making the decisions throughout the week. So we all have to have faith in something, right? Just like the people in the factories and on the battlefield and those building the airfields and doing all these things had to have faith in something to keep going when the voice of a nation went away. Leaders are essential for projecting a sense of vision and inspiring faith that brings continuity to a group. Okay? So, as a leader, you want to coalesce everyone around a point or a vision, but you can't make them do it, can you not? You have to inspire people to get on board with that. You have to bring them along, as we say. But the people must also share that vision and understand it, or they will falter when leadership changes or is not present, which is more common than not. You know, leadership changes are normal, but usually what happens is kind of like when you leave your kids alone in a room. I like it when I leave the kids alone in a room and I come back and everybody goes, and they give me that look. And you know that something just happened while you were out of the room. And why is that? Because they don't share my concept of what they should be doing in that room. You see, so when I leave the room, if they don't already share my concept of what should be done in that room, then I'm going to come back to something unexpected, aren't I? And the reality is that most of our life is made up of moments when our leaders, the people that we admire and follow, their voice is not present with us. They're not telling us what to do. When I'm driving down the road without my wife in the car, I have an individual choice to make as to whether I stop at a stop sign, don't I? Now, better yet, it would probably be my daughter that would remind me of my poor driving. But that's what we do. We don't live our life with the voice of our leaders in our head constantly. We make individual decisions, and we have to make those decisions with or without our faith. And so we have to have our own faith in God. Even though our leader has great faith, if I don't have great faith and my leader does, where does that leave me? See, our faith in God is much the same. It's great to have strong, committed leadership, but if the individuals being led don't have strong personal faith, will they be able to survive a crisis? If my kids know or don't know, if I haven't told them don't stick a fork in the electric socket, and I leave them in a room with an electric socket and a fork and nothing else, if they don't understand that that's not a good idea, they're going to do it. We've all been there. We've ended up with children in some strange places, including the roof, because they don't know any better. And the voice of a leader is not always there. So it's extremely important that each individual person has their own faith. Essentially, the pastor's faith doesn't cover you. You must have your own. So let's take this a little further. This means each of us having a real personal relationship with God, not a vicarious experience based on leaders' words. We live in a YouTube world, don't we? Like, used to be, when I was a teenager, I liked to work on cars and mess with that. And so what I would have to do is I would have to get in this car that I was having trouble with. It was barely running. And I would have to drive it over to what I called the old guy's house, which were younger than me at the time. And I'd drive it over to their place, and they would help me figure it out. And now what do? We watch a video. So I don't have to drive the car. I watch a video, and I watch someone else's experience that I've never known. And suddenly I feel like I have the experience to do something. Suddenly I have the knowledge it takes to do something, but I still haven't done it. I still haven't fixed my car. And I may not have the tools to do it, but I'm confident because I watched a YouTube video. Right? And we live in a crisis, in a time of a crisis of faith where many people do the same thing. They watch a guy on TV who talks about faith in God. They watch a show where something great or miraculous happened to someone else, and like a sports team, they relate to it, but that isn't faith in God. Faith in God is something that happens when we interact with God in prayer and through the scriptures and for real. It's not something that you catch from me or Jim or your leader. It's not. You have to make a decision. So this faith by association mindset will inevitably lead to the collapse of any group that espouses it. Or more importantly, it will lead to the collapse of any person who espouses it. And here in the Bible Belt, we have a huge issue with it. And people that have grown children right now often experience it. They think that they're covered by their parents. Or they think that they're covered by their grandparents. And guys, that's not the truth. The truth is, the only person that can cover you is Jesus Christ. You're not covered by your neighbor's faith who you go over and drink coffee with in the morning and they tell you all about it and you pray and you go home and you know that you don't have faith of your own. You have to have faith of your own. As Christians, our leaders are tasked with pointing individuals toward God. They exist to pilot organizations and rally people of faith to action. Leaders help guide people. They may be gifted or not, but they have no more access to God than you or anyone else. You see, we know that in history there were times when leaders tried to withhold that and say, well, I am the oracle of God and you have to come to me and I'll tell you what God says. But we know we live in something different than that. We know that we have the Bible. We have it in our paper forms, and we have it in electronic forms. We have it in so many forms. It's more available than it's ever been, but I get the feeling that it's more underutilized than it's ever been based on how much availability there is. Why? Well, because those people, that leader, that person, they have faith, and I'm following them. But am I building my own? Am I exercising my own faith? Am I growing myself? Misunderstanding the role of a leader can result in that leader becoming an idol. And that's dangerous, is it not? How many we do that with sports teams, and we do that with singers, and we do that with entertainers that we love. We follow them, and we have to walk that careful line of admiring someone and idolizing them, and it's tough. But it's really, really dangerous when we do that in our walk with God. When we look at someone who's a great teacher or a great leader, and we get to the point where we start investing our faith in their presentation of God and not God himself. And this is the danger that I'm driving at today, is we have so many people who feel like by some connection or association they have faith, but they don't have it in here. They don't have real faith deep within that can survive a crisis. Because what happens if their FDR dies? if the fireside chat stops, do they have the faith to get back up and go out there and build more planes and tanks? Or do they have the faith to get back there, out there on the battlefield, even though someone who inspired them is gone? The same way with the man on the battlefield, or the man in a relationship with his wife. If you lose your partner, are you going to lose your faith? Was your faith invested in them, or was it invested in God? You see, these are real things. These are real problems that we face every day, is where is our faith? So a good leader has the responsibility to work to encourage a strong and secure faith held by individuals who can remain faithful when that leader is absent. Because that's the reality of life, isn't it? You don't want me around you all the time, right? You don't need to record a sermon and have it playing constantly. You need to have some of your own faith. And that sermon that you might be listening to might become your conversation with God through prayer throughout the week. You speaking to God and hearing Him speak back to you through your study and through your diving into the Word to find out things, because maybe I said something here that spurred you on, but it can't just be my words. It can't just be Jim's words. It can't just be your favorite online Bible teacher's words. It has to be that, like Paul, if you were in prison, that you would still have your own faith in a God that you know exists, and He is there for you. So here's an example of this. We'll call it God, Gold, and a Terrible Idea. In Exodus 19, we begin a narrative where God calls Moses to the mountain in the wilderness of Sinai. And we know this story. We learned it when we were little kids. God begins the process of introducing commandments, laws, and instructions for the tabernacle. God begins his conversation with Moses, and this is very interesting. He begins his conversation with Moses by reminding him of how he and the Israelites got to where they are. And this is extremely important, because faith is based on something that, see, everything that happens to us, because we live in time, there's nothing that happened to me that's not in the past. Like the fact that I just said that now is in the past. Mm-hmm. See, so we are constantly looking back for affirmation of what's going to take place in the future. So even though people will say the past is not important, it is. It's important to remember how we got here. And what is the first thing that God reminds Moses of? How they got there. So let's look at Exodus 19, verses 3 through 6. And it says, you follow along. Moses went up to the mountain to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. This is what you must say to the house of Jacob and explain to the Israelites. You have seen what I, God, did to the Egyptians, and how I, God, carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will carefully listen to me, God, and keep my, God, commandments or covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples. Although the whole earth is mine, see, he reminds them, I own it all, but I've chosen you. And you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. And these are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. It's very important as we move forward in this story, in this narrative, that we remember who I was there. It's that same I am that got all this started, isn't it? In chapter 24 of Exodus, God calls Moses up to the mountain. Again, this time Moses and Joshua went up to the mountain for 40 days. And so when he goes, Moses delegates authority to Aaron and Hur. So let's look at what happens in Exodus 24, verses 12 through 18. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and stay there so that I may give you the stone tablets with the law and commandments I have written for their instruction. So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua and went up to the mountain of God. And he told the elders, wait here for us until we return for you. Aaron and Hur are here with you. Whoever has a dispute should go to them. And when Moses went up the mountain, the cloud covered it. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the 7th day, he called Moses from the cloud. The appearance of the Lord's glory to the Israelites was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop. Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain, and he remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Now see, there's two different things going on here. He's left Aaron and Hur with everybody. And now Moses and Joshua are following God where they need to go, and the people are here where they need to be. But let's look again at a little history here. It has not been long since Moses had been taught by Jethro, his father-in-law, about the importance of delegating tasks to other qualified men. Because it's important. No one can do everything. We found that out in VBS this week, didn't we? How many people? Tons of people to make this stuff happen. Every group that started out as 2 ended up as 4. Everything. That's how it works. Because people begin to see that vision of what's going on, and they begin to figure out where they fit in, and they get in there, and they gel, and they start working, and all of a sudden the task gets accomplished because people, they share that vision, and they know what's going on. So back in Exodus 18, we had seen Moses trying to answer everybody's questions, trying to settle all the disputes, and trying to do this all by himself, and he would sit there literally all day long handling this stuff. And Jethro says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, the people trust me, you know?" And so Jethro said, "No, okay, the people trust you, so go find trustworthy men, vet them out, and start delegating some of this." You know, my old boss, he told me, he said, everybody tells me it's okay, I only want 15 minutes of your time. He said, so after the 30th person, it's been all day. And that's life. Everybody wants 15 minutes, but one person can't give everybody 15 minutes, and that's a fact. And that's where it comes in that it's important that everybody know what's going on and that everybody share in the vision so that we as a church or an organization or a group or a family can transfer some of this responsibility, which is pretty great, to each other. So Moses knew this. You know, he had been instructed by Jethro, you need to learn to transfer authority to other people in order to get the job done. It's still on Moses' shoulders, is it not? But he's using other people to make that happen. And so Moses has been learning. He's been listening. And unfortunately, he chose Aaron and Hur. But we'll see where that goes. So Moses departed to receive instructions from God, leaving the Israelites under the guidance of Aaron for 40 days. So we're back to that God golden and terrible idea with Exodus 32. So here's what happens. We won't read all of Exodus 32. We break it up into some sections here so that we get the gist of what's going on. But this is the story of the famous golden calf. But we're going to look at some of the details that are here as we break this down. When the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us. Who will go before us? Because this is Moses. Because this Moses, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." First off, lie number one. Because if we remember back what we read earlier, who was it that brought them out of Egypt? It was I Am that did that. It was not Moses. Why do you think God reminded him at the beginning? Aaron replied to them, "Take off the gold rings that..." Wait a minute. Aaron replied to them? Now, isn't he supposed to be in charge? And what does he do? He jumps on board and starts helping. "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives." I'll bet that went over well. "Your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." So that all the people took off their gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took the gold from them and fashioned it with an engraving tool and made it into the image of a calf. Okay, let's read that again because that's going to be important later. He took the gold from them, fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made it into an image of a calf. He intentionally made a calf. And then they said, "Israel, these are your gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt." Is that what God told Moses to tell the people earlier? I mean, he just told them this. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it and made an announcement. There will be a festival to the Lord tomorrow. Wow. Early the next morning they arose, offered burnt offerings, and presented fellowship offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink and got up to party. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people who you brought up from the land of Egypt have acted corruptly." Even God's frustrated. See? "They have quickly turned from the way I commanded them, and they have made for themselves an image of a calf. They have bowed down to it, sacrificed to it, and said, 'Israel, these are your gods, who brought you up from the land of Egypt.' And the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen this people, and they are indeed a stiff-necked people.'" Kind of remind me of myself. Then Moses asked Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you have led them into such a grave sin?" That's very interesting, Aaron's response here after what we just read. He said, "Don't be enraged, my Lord," talking to Moses, little L. Aaron replied, "You yourself know that the people are intent on evil. They said to me, 'Make gods for us, who will go before us,' because this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' And they gave it to me, and when I threw it in the fire, out came this calf." I've heard that from my kids before. "Well, I don't know, but it just sort of happened." Now, wait a minute. It said that he fashioned it. It just happened. Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control. He wasn't a leader, making them a laughingstock to their enemies. So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, these people have committed a grave sin. They have made a god of gold for themselves. Now, if you would only forgive their sin, but if not, please erase me from the book you have written." The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will erase from my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I've told you about. See, my angel will go before you. But on the day I settle accounts, I will hold them accountable for their sin." And the Lord inflicted a plague on the people for what they did with the calf Aaron had made. Now the leader made mistakes, but the people are held accountable. Every one of us has choices to make. My life and the actions that I take aren't decided by the governor of this state. He might sign something into law. He might have, because he signed something, the police will have power to enforce punishment on me. But you know, almost the only reason that a crime is because it already occurred. There's a lot more crimes that occur than are intended. Most of them go through, and the police are there to clean it up. You see, we get away with most of the things we want to do wrong, don't we? Now, we pay the price, but we pay it individually. Just like God said, "No, Moses, you don't get to take the heat for them. I'll punish them." So, I guess that means that if my friend is a good Christian and I'm not, then I'm not covered. So fully embracing their misunderstanding of who had delivered and kept them, which was God, and exploiting the clear weakness of Aaron, the Israelites decided to build that idol, didn't they? The people and Aaron team up, with Aaron offering assistance. Now he was, obviously he was kind of a fun leader because he led them completely the wrong direction, but he didn't have any backbone, did he? He led them right in the wrong direction. See, he went with their ideas instead of holding to the vision. Moses will be back because God said he'll be back. I may not know exactly when that's going to happen, but he will be back. So they formed a golden calf and became their new representation of God. Yes, God with a big G. The words used for God in verse 4 and Lord in verse 5 are not little g deities. That doesn't mean that the calf itself is God, but that means that they thought it was okay for that calf to be a representation of God. Because, and here's where they were off the rails, is that they thought Moses was like the calf. They thought Moses was the person, who brought them out of Egypt. So they were idolizing him before they were idolizing the calf. And you get that? The problem already existed. The golden calf ends up being just it coming to a head, as we say, don't we? When we know that there's something going on, and then all of a sudden there's a fight. Is the fight really the problem, or is all this history where it transpired? You see, they were already idolizing Moses, or they wouldn't have had to build a calf to replace him. Because their eyes would have been on God, big G, not their little idol. But see, God wasn't enough for them, because they hadn't really invested themselves in knowing him. And if we read the history of the Israelites, God's chosen people, they were a lot like us. They constantly turned their back on God. So going for the gold, we see Israel attribute the works of God during their journey to this new idol they have made as they recall God's miracles. Aaron's call for a festival to the Lord in verse 5 is especially troubling, as the word here is Yahweh. So he's going to have a festival to the God of the universe with a little piece of gold celebrating him. Which means Aaron has decided that making a golden calf is a good way to worship God. Don't we do that? We come up with an idol and then say, well, it's okay because I'm going to use it to glorify God. Happens all the time. We have another huge issue that we have. It has been happening for thousands of years. It's not new. It's just what we decide to idolize. So who were they following? So here's a list of some of the confusion that's going on here. First, Aaron and the people make an idol because Moses has been gone too long. Even though it was the same God that has delivered them so far that asked him to come and said he'd be back with the tablets. Second, they attribute acts performed by God to the idol. And third, they mix the worship and celebration of God with idolatry. So let me get this straight. Because of the absence of one leader, an entire community of people go off the rails and forget who God is and dive into idol worship. So how do we, the people of God today, avoid this kind of confusion? How do we prevent the kind of failure we see in Exodus 32 and that kind of failure that we see all over our world today? Do we not? Do we not? Oh, I just love that leader. I just love that preacher on TV. Do you love God as much as you love them? You see, when I say something, or Jim says something, that should spur you on to find out what God says about it and to verify us. Every time. Any leader, you should be ready, whether it's your Sunday school teacher or whoever it is, you should have that burning desire and that relationship and that faith in yourself that you are studying and that you are making sure that what they say is the truth. We want to have good leaders. We want to follow our parents, our big brother, our big sister. We want to follow these influences in our life, and that's good. It's good to have good leaders. It's good to coalesce around good leaders. But in the eternal sense, their faith doesn't save you. Jesus does by faith. So what the people of Israel lacked was a personal commitment to following God. What little faith, and we know Jesus said it doesn't take much. Unfortunately, theirs was misplaced. What little faith they had was placed in Moses, who they replaced with a golden calf. And he was only a man. 1 Peter 1, 15 through 16 says, "But as the one who called you is holy, you are also to be holy in all your conduct. For it is written, 'Be holy, because I am holy.'" Who's the I there? It's God, not your favorite leader. It is essential that each person have their own relationship with God, and how easy it is to miss that. Sure, it's great to have strong leaders, and we need them. But it is greater to have a people of strong faith who support good leaders. So the question today, as we move into a time of invitation, is, do you have this faith? Do you have your own faith, like Paul in a prison dungeon, who can write someone else, like we learned about in Sunday school this morning, and encourage them to be faithful? Because no matter where he is, his faith belongs to Christ and in him alone. And in the absence of whoever, he's not going to make a golden calf and say, God, you need this calf to be part of what is going on in my life. No. There's no idol. There's no person. There's no organization that's going to get you to heaven. That's going to, more importantly, give you a relationship with God right now. You see, it starts right now. It's not all about, oh, well, when I die, God will make me a person that wants to live in heaven. It's about that transformation that starts the moment you accept Christ and begin that faith relationship that's yours to grow. And so my question for you is, do you have this faith? And if not, do you know that you can? Do you know that it can be your faith? And that person of faith that you admire so much doesn't have anything that you can't have. They don't have that because of where they are or where they were born. They have it because Christ gives it to them for free, because he paid the price already. Let's pray.